Okay, meeting is officially called to order. Gavel wrap if you want to. Slide number 1, which Virgil has up, that's just the normal introductory thing. These are who the officers are. This is slide number 2 is the, meet and greet. We just finished. Meeting starts. New member recognition. Do we have new members here? Do we have guests or visitors? None here. Do we have new members, guests, or visitors on Zoom? I don't think so. That takes care of all of that. Program. Mike, you're getting ready to be up. Oh, sorry about that.
I am.
See, this is why Virgil gets the big bucks here, as he keeps me in line some of the time. So we're going to do introductions, and I'm going to make some notes. So I'm going to go first. I'm John N7NWL. I'm president, so that means I'm responsible for the problems, and I get to share all the accolades with everybody else, which I'm comfortable with.
I'm Virgil, K7VZ.
I'm Brian, W7JET.
Richard, N7NT.
Bob, NA7RH.
Steve, K7SP.
Steve, N7TX.
Gary, K8BN.
Walt, NJHE.
Norm, N9AV.
Ingrid, W7ISG.
Lionheart, K7RGG.
Ron, WA0KDS.
Mike, N7MW, still treasurer because Tom is on injured reserve for the next few months.
Gary, KC7CS.
Already did. Okay. Thanks, everybody. It's good to see everybody here. And I'm going to stop wandering around and give Virgil the microphone back. The mic is turned on. I didn't forget this time, which I do. This point in the program, we're up with the what? Oh, my bad. See, this is why Virgil gets the year-end bonus pay also. There's going to be a story behind that one day, but not today. Okay, if the Zoom folks could introduce themselves, please, I'd appreciate it. And I apologize.
Mike, KC7V.
Lee, KY7M.
Rick, W0RIC.
John, K7 Weenie Pistol.
Paul, N3PS.
Mike, K7ING.
Ned, AA7A.
Jim, N7US.
Jim, KC1BB.
Hey, it sounds like we've got everybody. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it for y'all being here. Program time is going to be WRTC, which is the World Radiosport Team Championship experience from 2023 that Mike Fulcher, KC7V, was able to participate in. And he's going to show us and tell us what all he got to do and all the cool things about it. So, Mr. Mike, you got it.
All right, let me see if I can share my screen. WRTC is the World Radio Team Championship. It started with a small group in 1990 in Seattle, a group of what everyone would consider probably elite contesters got together, and the whole thought process behind this competition was that there were two-man teams. They would try to figure out who the best operators are in the world. And over time, the next one did not occur till 1996, and it evolved as rules changed and layouts changed of the activity. And there began in place a qualifying process, if you will, that required nowadays like 3 years worth of competitions, certain contests, ARRL, CQ Worldwide, the big ones, and you gain points from how you finish, and that becomes the qualifying process to be a team leader, and the team leader can choose their partner for the contest. So in my story, I knew about 1996, so I went up on business to San Francisco area and then hung around for the weekend. At the time, I was just going to enjoy the fun and camaraderie, but I got pulled into being a referee because back in those days, it wasn't as well known. They didn't have a lot of people around to do this, so they asked if I would volunteer, so I did. And at the time, I had I4UFH and I2VJN as my team. that I was the referee for. And a referee's job is to monitor for 24 hours, stay awake, to make sure they follow the rules, don't cheat, don't sneak things out. They don't, they can't self-identify themselves, even though once they go on voice, people get figured out who they're talking to. But at least on Morse code, they got to follow certain procedures, and even on voice too, but never self-identify who the operator is or where they're from. So as we move on, I took part in WRTC in Brazil in 2006 as a referee. Then in 2014 in Boston as a referee, 2018 in Germany as a referee, again in July of 2023 in Bologna, Italy as a referee. And even though it's called WRTC 2022, things got delayed 1 year because of COVID. And so the affair didn't actually come off until July of 2023. Now, so it was a good time. And as you can see, sign in, please. You can see a lot of, if you're a DXer or contest, you can see a lot of familiar calls on this sheet. Well, it's actually a big cloth sheet that they use for people to sign their calls to. So you can see it down. It's in the bottom, a little bit on the left is where I signed in. Good stuff, good people. This show is going to have a lot of different things about pictures of people and places. The Hotel Anuska is the headquarters this year in Bologna. It's probably about 35 minutes or so from the airport there in Bologna. It was an interesting concept because the U.S. guys in 2014, the German guys in 2018, extremely organized, everything in its place, consistent. Well, the Italians were a little bit different, and it was like W9CF, who's the local guy here who goes to Italy almost every summer for a couple of weeks, says at the end they usually pull it off, and they did this year too. Although, as Fabio I4UFH, who was the chairman of this year or for this event, says, "Hey, we do it on Italian time." So you take what you get, and you just gotta live with it. This is where I stayed, Hotel Castello. I stayed with W6NV Oliver from Northern California. He's my travel mate typically for Visalia and Dayton and WRTC. Got a lot of different pictures of different people. This was the judging committee for 2022. You see Dick in front, N6AA, and Tine behind him, S50A. In the middle is Fabio, I4UFH, Gina UA9MA, and Rusty W6OAT. And Ohms, PY5EG, was also a judge, but he wasn't there for the picture. He got in a day late. I've known all these guys personally for quite a long time now. So I got a lot of different pictures I'll run through pretty quickly of some of the people that participated. Adrian, KOS, SCA, KO8 SCA is on the right. This is a Romanian team. And I don't know all the guys' calls on the left, but good bunch of guys to hang with. Here we've got the Ukrainian contingent. Now, as you know, with the affair going on between Russia and Ukraine, there were Russians there and as well as Ukraine, but they were told before they even got there that things have to be kept quiet, no flying team flag colors and that kind of stuff at award ceremonies, and everybody fell in line. So there was really no, at least outward animosity that you could see. But on the left, UW7LL, there's Yuri, YU3DZ to his right, and then UR7EU and UR5ECW. If you've been around long enough, you've worked champ, I got that backwards, E21 EIC, and his wife, E20 NKB. And there's his wife on the left. This was Bun, E25 KAE, who was there in a support role for the team, Team Asia. Now, here in this picture, you see Jackie, Sue is the XYL of Jackie, ZL3CW. I go back with Jackie to 1986 in Tokyo when he was attached to the French embassy there. He was military. And when I'd fly in, I would spend the evenings with him at his home, which wasn't far from the hotel I usually stayed at. So I became his QSL manager for things for a while, and he became my QSL manager when I was working around in Asia and the Pacific. Next to him is Bud at A3B, avid contester, and his wife. And below is, I'm not even sure who that is below. PY2NY, also a very familiar calling contests and DXing, both. JA1BJI, Taro, and a G Meet and the JR2GRX on the right, part of the JA contingent that was there. VDA, FY5FY, and on the right is Harry, RA3AUU. At least some of you I know have met him that are in this meeting, have probably met him in the past, because he was through Phoenix way back when Vince was still alive, and we had a get together when they were on their way to Spratley or someplace that they might have gone to the first time, but certainly didn't the second time. So on the left is Dave, G3NKC, was a good friend of Roger, G3SXW, and Martin, GD4XUM, were teammates for EU2. The regions, there were 57 teams broken down, two-man teams from around the world. And the allocation gets a little complicated, but there's so many, it just depends on the number of size of the country, number of operators available, and that's all done by the organizing committee, in this case by the Italians. But they followed pretty closely along with the Germans, what the Germans did in the past and what the US has done in the past. The youngest team was Leon, DL3ON on the left, and right is Megan, EI5LA, and actually acquitted themselves fairly well. Kazu, he's another good friend. He's JK3GAD, but he lives in London as M0CFW. He's usually joins me and Oliver in Visalia every year. So good guy to know. He's a little hard to understand with his English, but fun guy. He also goes to EA. He's been going to EA9 lately for CQ Worldwide. Israeli team was Seth 4X1DX and Zvi 4X6FR. And youngsters on the air. You know, DK, I think DK6SP on the left is an up-and-comer. YU5EA, 9A3 SMS, EI5LA, DL3ON, and M0SDV. And it was really nice to have a young team like them there to participate in this event. They're making WRTC's making a big effort to include as much youth as they can. Now, our site manager for my team was Laura, IZ4MPI, and then Fabio, who was the chairman of the organizing committee this year. As I mentioned earlier, I was a referee for Fabio back in 1996, so I've known him a long time. And I got to say, it probably didn't hurt me to get selected as a referee because of a personal relationship there. But Laura did a fantastic job for our team. I got some pictures of that later. We got a chance to meet her husband and her daughter while we were there. Ash 3V8SS, also known as KF5EYY, Bill W9KKN. Bill is now the guy that does the super check parcel collection for the various contest programs. And Johan's 5T5PA, who now lives in Taiwan, but he doesn't have an active license as of yet. But I know several of us worked him in on 6 meters from 5T5, which was quite a thrill. Most of you know him, Steve, London, N2IC. Steve is over in Hanover, New Mexico area on a hilltop location. As you know, he's a very active contester and probably one of the best in the world. Sati, JE1JKL, who's also 9M6NA. He sat with us at the dinner table at our hotel. Sandy DL1QQ, she was a major fundraiser for WRTC 2018. And she spends a lot of time in the USA now operating at K3LR's place. The JT1CO on the left and Crossy K1LZ on the right. As you can see, WRTC attracts people from all over the world. Neither one of these two were competitors, but they were just there as sponsors and to have some fun. One of the youngest guys, RA9P Alexei, I got a chance to meet, a competitor from Russia. And Oliver's my travel buddy usually. And for Visalia, I typically go up there on a Wednesday. I spend Wednesday and Thursday and to Friday morning with Oliver, his wife, and K0AV, and we drink wine, go out to dinner with some of the other locals there, and have a good time, and then head off to Visalia. Dale BA4TB. I was talking to Dale and his partner at WRTC before they announced who was going to host the 2026 WRTC competition. But I know the Chinese are interested. I think they can get the money, according to Dale. But the problem really is right now is licensing and how they can overcome that. So that remains to be seen if that's a future opportunity. John G4IRN, who's presented to CADXA in the past in the UK. I told John that he was in charge of the 2026 pub crawl in the UK. That fits him to a T. RW0A, he's zone 18 guy, and RC90, who is the father of RA9P, who I showed a couple of slides ago. This was at a luncheon they took us to after a couple tours of a couple of museums. Philippe, CT1ILT, another one of the younger guys in the competition. And then Olaf, G0CKV. Olaf is out of the UK, but he also works in Sweden, and he goes to 3B8 every year, along with Oliver. This was our dinner table at the Banquets Award. Dove 4Z4DX. If you work DX for any length of time, I'm sure this guy is in your log. Very pleasant to chat with. Fun-loving guy. One of the hardest working guys at committee was Claudio, I4VEQ. He put a lot of time and effort into making us all together. And he was a kind of a go-to guy if you needed something. Now, on the first tour that we took, the day at least that I took a tour, was to the Marconi tour, the home and museum of Marconi. And this was the house, the Marconi house. You can't, there's a tower hiding behind these trees over here. There's a tower and current modern Yagis and things. But on the left, there still exists the old pole that they used from in the early 1900s. This is just a statue of him. And this is looking down. That's the tour bus. There you can see more modern type antennas. It's not a close-up shot, but so the station can still be active. Like a lot of pictures and a lot of old equipment for Marconi inside the museum. This gives you an idea of some of it. This was equipment that was the same equipment that was used on the 1909 Republic and the 1912 Titanic. Same setup. And they got here. And some of the stuff actually still works. You can set it up and hit the key and it'll buzz. And really, it's really pretty unique. Everything's in great condition. Marconi had a lot of different inventions. We also visited the Radio Telegraph and Radio Phone Museum, and it had a lot of different, everything from some radios to a Mac, an old time Mac, to phonographs, and you can see some of these in the bottom. I got some bigger ones too in there. It was very unique. Covers all kinds of different time frames. Part of downtown Bologna, as you can see, close-knit streets as we're all walking on to the museum. It was a unique thing at the hotel. Of course, all our dinners were paid for. So every night and dinner, we had to order for the next night, and they'd bring us a little menu. This was what was available. What do we want? So you just put an X in, hand it in. When you get back to the hotel the next night, that's what you got served. Espresso. In Italy, it's about 2 sips and you're done. Strong stuff, but it's not like a cup of coffee that we're used to here. No grandes and whatever the ventes, none of that stuff. Although they did have American coffee that you could have, Americano, if you wanted it. So this is the first meeting for all. The orange shirts are referees, the yellow shirts are competitors. And they had 2 screens showing rules and call sign allocations and things of that nature. So I was the second to the last referee to be drawn, and I drew Uli, DM5 Echo Echo on the left, and Holger, DL9 Echo Echo on the right. They're both from the northern part of Germany. Very good guys. And it turned out, I'll probably mention this again, but it turned out in the first 6 hours of the contest, they were leading the pack out of 57 teams. I didn't know this. And, they faded a little bit towards the end, but they still finished number 6, which is not bad out of 50. And that was the first time either one was a competitor. Uli, he qualified for Africa as an Africa AF3 team because when he was going through the qualification process, he was living in South Africa as ZR2A, and he was a team leader, and he chose Holger as his running mate for this contest. Now, I'll mention this, most of you know this, but WRTC is held over the IARU weekend in July. So it's a 24-hour event. And this was the government allocated, the calls all start with I-4 because Bologna is in the Italy 4 area of Italy. So they wouldn't go out beyond I-4, but they used the same format the Germans use, which was one letter, 2-number call sign. And these were all the calls that were available for the drawing. So my team ended up drawing Italy 4-2 Mike. Now, it was very different this year. In Germany, it was tense. In Boston, it was tense. In Italy, the majority of us were in a bed and breakfast place. So I can't say it was uncomfortable because we had air conditioning and bathrooms and access to coffee and an espresso machine. So I can't complain. This is a pretty cool place. It was called Mama's. So on Friday night, after we all got set up and everything, we decided that we wanted real Italian pizza for dinner. So Laura went out and brought back 5 pizzas for 3 people. So it's like, no, we can't eat all of this stuff, but and over there, if you say you want a pepperoni pizza, that's very different. It's peppers. So if you order salami, then you get a spicy type pepperoni that we're familiar with here. So we had combination cheese and pepperoni. We had I had some Zambuca at dinner one night, and I was talking to Laura about it. So she called her husband, and he brought over to the hotel several types of Zambuca. And so we were doing a little bit of taste testing for it. The call sign for WRTC is unveiled 15 minutes before the start of a contest. So you can't, you have to shut everything off. You can't be on the air. Now you can enter your call sign in, and my guys used DX log. Some competitors use N1MM. A few might have used a WinTest, but those are the 3 major ones that were available that most competitors used. So here's the setup in the hotel room. Both guys brought along their FT101 DXs. They're nice radios, but they're big. They're not small. With a laptop and also monitors along. So these guys, of course, they drove to Italy from Germany so they could haul all of this stuff with them. So the setup, and you'll see in a minute, is one operator on the left, one operator on the right, and I will sit in the middle with my own access to headphones to listen to either radio. So here's a little closer shot of what one station looks like. They also had low power VA6AN bandpass filters for each band, along with OK2ZAW, I think, switching array here, and a tuner for 80 meters. So these guys were well prepared and well equipped. Now the organized committee provided rotator equipment. They provided this device you can see here. My mouse is that's my job is it's a 100 watt contest. Okay, there's no amplifiers. So you've got yellow, green, and red. if the transmitter is in red, then you got to reduce power. It can flicker occasionally. What you want is green and with a flicker yellow from time to time, but no red. So my job was to monitor to make sure that that didn't occur. There was a real live time scoring setup that's sent to the organized committee at headquarters. That was all automatically set up through a network. Now, this is an agricultural area. So this was behind the bed and breakfast, farm fields. And most of the competitors were in similar things like this, not so much in a city environment. They also supplied a mast, a crank-up mast, with a rotator on top. And there's some stories I'll talk about around that. But as I talked about my setup, here's me in the middle. My headphones, I could listen to either radio or both at the same time, no matter what mode they were on. And I spent literally the 24 hours with one radio in one ear and one radio in the other ear. As you can see, Cressy, K1LZ, has donated and provided these antennas for WRTC. These antennas have all been put back together and they will be used in WRTC 2026 in the UK. So it just gives you an idea. The mast itself is only about, I would say, a little over 20 feet tall, 25 feet tall maybe. Below the antenna, there was a dipole or a sloper, if you will, for 40. Actually, an inverted V for 40. And then below that, an inverted V for 80. So 40 and 80 weren't very tall, weren't very high. They did have some problems with noise. They did get permission to move the legs of the antennas around to mitigate it. And also, the way it was originally set up, they found a better array, different settings so they could lower the SWR by moving the wires away and closer together. So that's how they got the SWR down to manage it. Here's the guys in front of the thing. Wimo was one of their sponsors of these two guys. That's a UK thing. Sun going down, you can see the antenna and the mast and the setup. So it doesn't take up a tremendous amount of room, but it's a nice little setup. The coax was provided, so all they had to do was go out and run the coax into the hotel room and then set up all their equipment, and we're ready to go. So setup was typically maybe 3 or 4 hours worth of time getting the equipment set up. The antenna stuff was pretty easy. So I'm going to run through a little bit of winners. The phone winners were YU5EEA and 9A3 SMS, two of the youth guys. When I talk about I'm going to go back a second and talk about the masts and some of the antennas. A number of teams had severe noise problems. And one of the stations that was close to us was John W2GD and AA3B. They had to physically lower the mast, physically lift it, move it about 50 feet as far as the coax is stretched to get rid of some of the noise issues. So it wasn't ideal for everybody. Some people had noise, some people didn't. The worst situation was K9CT Craig and KE9U, I think it is, Scott. They were happily operating all day long until night came and the lights came on. And when the lights came on, their noise went from almost nothing to over S9 all night long. And even trying to move stuff around, they worked stuff still, but their rate was killed. And they didn't finish last, but they were like second or third to last. And it was all just because of the noise. A couple of stations had the rotator fall off the mast. Another one had the antenna break and they had to use it in a vertical position for the rest of the contest. So wasn't perfect. I can tell you that some of the site managers, while they were great guys and good people, I don't think they always had a real good clue on setting stations up, antennas and stuff. Some of the work was pretty shoddy and choppy. Well, anyway, it's pretty bad. Not all the bolts were tight enough, things of that nature. So guys suffered from some of that. The CW winners, these guys had always been top in the CW side. F1 AKK on the left and F8 DBF on the right. I-47 Mike was their call sign. It's a funny story because at least in my mind, maybe not to everybody, but as we were going through the drawing of calls, they had a list down the thing, and I knew where we were going to draw, like in the 25th. So I counted down 25 calls or whatever, and it said I-42M, and I'm thinking, I bet they get that call, and they sure as hell did. So I don't know if that was just coincidence or the Italians didn't think about that. Anyway, U team winners were I-43O, UR5YKO, and YL3JA. I took a lot of these pictures just so you can see faces attached with call signs, because we don't always get to have that opportunity. You know, for me, the competition's fun, being a referee's fun, as long as you got enough coffee to stay awake and jump around a little bit. But it's really the camaraderie. It's, you know, meeting old friends again, making new friends, the competition from around the world that, you know, typically you work on the air a lot, but you don't always get a chance to meet them. And that's why I like being part of WRTC. And I know Ray's not on an N6VR. He was there. He just came as a guest. And there were several people like that, just came to have fun, meet people. So, you know, the next one is in London in 2026. So you might want to think about that, because I know from my standpoint and Ned's standpoint and Lee's standpoint, we already know almost all the G's that are on the organizing committee, because we've operated with them as Voodoo Contest Group. The second place team, I-43C, these guys, they have probably finished second 3 or 4 times at WRTC. I got to know them quite a bit. GJ5MW on the left, DL1IAO on the right. DL1IAO is an ophthalmologist. I sat next to him at dinner for 4 nights. And so we got to share some wine and share some grappa and some other stuff, and just get to know him. That was quite a bit of fun. And of course, the winners were this year were I-44 Whiskey, UAVE3DZ, and UW7LL. Now, UW7LL still lives in Ukraine with his mother. His mother was in Mariupol, or one of those towns that got destroyed. And so she's okay, but she's now living with him. But he had to get special permission, 1, to leave Ukraine, 2, couldn't fly. So he had to take a train to Moldova and then fly to Italy, and the same going back. Fly to Moldova and then take a train to get back to his home in Ukraine. So I apologize. I'm still fighting off a bit of a cold. So it was no easy effort for him to make this trip. It took a long time, 1, to get permission for him to go. You know, he's not old, but he's not young. But he could still be in that age where, you know, he could get in the Army, for example. The WRTC 2022 final results, you can see if you go down to number 6, which is my team, as I said before, they were leading for the first 6 hours of the contest. Now, I didn't know that, and they didn't know that, because I wasn't watching the scoreboard. I could have if I wanted to use my phone, but I didn't want to know, because I didn't want to encourage them or discourage them or anything. I just say, hey, go for it. Now, if you're a contest op and a CW op, even a sideband op, you can tell when guys are good or they're okay, but they're not going to be top tier. And I knew pretty quickly that this team, like I have the LYs in 2018, who won the whole thing, that they were competitors. They could score well just by listening to them operate. Now, Dale, CE2SV, I was talking to Dale about 6 meters, because I've worked him several times on 6. Guys, don't worry about it. Work me as often as you want. I don't care. So if you hear him on 6, you can work him multiple times. Nodir, EY8MM. I met Nodir when he was UJ8JMM in 1990 in Leningrad at a Hamfest. And I brought his DXCC cards back to ARRL for them to get checked for him, and then shipped them back to him. And Roberto, CE3CT, also a guy I've met numerous times. he was very helpful. A couple of years ago, my brother and his wife are going to stop in Santiago. So I emailed him and said, what do you suggest he does? And he do. And he gave me some good suggestions. So it was good to catch up with him. Now, the leader for WRT 2026, the organized committee, is Mark M0DXR. These guys are already out planning, organizing, got rules in place, got the selection down as far as qualifying events go. Now, excuse me, some of the guys that you may not all know, but back in Africa, when we had two Lees for a couple times, Lee KY7M and Little Lee G0MTN. Little Lee is kind of slight, maybe 5'6" or 7 tall, but a good guy. And he's on the organizing committee. Fred G4BWP is on the organizing committee. I'm sure G4IRN will be pulled back into the organizing committee. So these are guys that I know. So hopefully my chances of being a referee will be good. If not, I'm still planning on going anyway, because I know these guys and I know it'll be a heck of a good time. So here's my story coming home. You know, the day that we were due to leave Bologna, we sat and waited for the bus to take us to the airport, figured out where to check in. I was flying on British Air. So I had a British Air flight back to Heathrow and from Bologna, and that went off without a hitch. But I knew, because I used frequent flyer miles to make this trip, so I knew that I was going to have to spend the majority of the night in the airport sleeping in a chair. So that's why I decided to do that and rough it myself. And I did, but I woke up about 5 in the morning. Everything was secure. There wasn't a worry about things getting stolen, even though I had it wrapped around my arms pretty good. I get up and I go to the gate and I see there's already a 4-hour delay. So wait, finally go down to the gate. We wait and we wait, 2-hour delay more. Wait, another 2-hour delay. And then, of course, like most airlines, they're not telling you jack. You don't know what's going on. And almost another 2 hours later, so after 6 hours of delay, they tell you the flight's canceled. Great. Now what? So we all have to go back out through customs into the lobby area, wait in this ridiculously long line to talk to the people, British Air people, and American combination, because that's who was flying on. And only to be told that they weren't going to put anybody up for the night. You would have to submit your expenses to get reimbursed. And you were on your own to make any hotel reservations and such. Well, by that, I couldn't find anything at the airport that wasn't already booked. So I found this little home. It has like 6 rooms in this little place that you can rent out for the night. So I took an Uber to this place, about 2.5 miles from the airport. Spent the night, got up at 5, took an Uber back to the airport, thinking, okay, at least, it's time to go home. Well, no, that wasn't the case either. Because I get back to the airport and find that my flight is already delayed another 4 hours, and which would mean I wouldn't be able to make my flight from Chicago, because that's what American had done. I had to go buy time to spend money on the phone to talk to American Airlines for my U.S. connections. And I finally got connected and got a connection, barely, only to find out the next morning when I go to the airport that flight's not going to, you can't make it because you won't get there in time. So, I was not happy and I bitched about it. And I went to 3 different supervisors before I finally got shuttled off to another person. And they finally got me rerouted same day through the British Air flight to Seattle and an American connection from Seattle home. And thankfully that flight went off. But I spent nearly a night and a half in the airport, almost, it seems like, to get home. And it took me, I sent all my expenses in, And I finally, less than 2 weeks ago, I got an email from American Airlines, and they comped me 800 miles for a future ticket that I can use anywhere. So I decided to use that instead of some cash because that could get me to Dayton and back, for example. So it was a trip from hell coming home. Instead of getting home on a Wednesday, I got home instead of getting home on a Tuesday, I got home on a Thursday. So that's the fun of international travel sometimes. I know many of you have experienced that too. So in 2026, as I've already mentioned, it's going to be held in the United Kingdom. Many of the photos here, some of them are my own, some I got from Nodir EYMM, who's an excellent photographer. If you've never seen his pictures online of Tajikistan and other places, you should look, because he really does a fantastic job. But overall, the experience is like nothing else in ham radio to me. I mean, it beats Dayton and Visalia hands down, because you're with people that share the same passion you do. Many consciences are also DXers. So, they play DX when they're not on a contest weekend. But if you look in your log, you'll find a lot of these guys were there. You've worked probably multiple times if you're active at all. So I would encourage, if you're thinking about ever wanting to go or volunteer, it's a great time. And you can reach out to the guys in the UK and think about participating. Any questions?
Mike, I have one.
Yes.
What is the penalty for rules infraction?
Well,
in the contest?
It's a good point. It's really left up to the judging committee. The Italian team, in the past, there's been issues with cheerleading. And with cheerleading, I mean that the friends who are there will say, oh, either they find out the call, and once they find out the call, they get all these other same country guys to work them, but they don't work anybody else. So I'll give you an example. The penalty is loss of QSOs. The number is kind of a secret. I don't know what it is, but I can tell you they made a big effort this year to cut down on the cheerleading efforts and try to identify it. Even though still the top team that won, the Ukrainians, lost a sizable amount of points for what was considered some cheerleading issues. And the team from Belarus, the most any other team worked out of Belarus hams was like 90. And they had over 400 Qs with other Belarus hams. So that's what they're trying to avoid. So that team, they didn't get disqualified, but they had lost a ton of points. They weren't in the winning percentage anyway. But yeah, they got penalized because it's to them, to the Italians and future organizations, it's almost like cheating. And you just don't do it. And it's surprising because at this level of competition, trying to be the best in the world, that my apologies, guys, that anybody would go through the effort to try to cheat. In this day and age, it's too easy to get caught and very hard to find. And even though they had a lot of Belarusians work them, and when you see something that's 300 plus more than the next closest team, something's not right with that. So does that answer your question, Jim?
Sort of. What about other violations other than cheerleading?
Well, the other violations would be self-identifying yourself. That's why you have referees there, to make sure that doesn't happen. Running excess power, 100-watt contest, unless you run out 200-watt radio long, you got to keep it at 100 watts. And out of the red zone when you transmit, that's also the referee's responsibility. They were told that at the end of a cue, you had to send TU, no dit, things of that nature. So those are things as a referee that I'm looking for, and making sure that they're not using, they could not use things like super check parcel, call history file. They couldn't use any of that stuff. So I had to make sure that none of that stuff was in use that we typically use, when you're on contesting from home, like a call history file and a super check parcel. That stuff all had to be disabled. And so my job, and all jobs of a referee, is to make sure none of that was being used. Those are the typical violations, you know, self-identifying. But most guys, that just doesn't happen much anymore. Cheerleading has been the major problem the last 2 times.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Hey, Mike, this is Steve. So given the low power and somewhat challenging antennas, especially on lower bands, was a QSO with the US worth more than something there in Europe, or is it the same point? Or how's that work?
No, it's the typical rules of IARU. So whatever the points are, they're the same. But you know, the operating from here is different. US ops learned this from Germany, I think, in 2019 or 2018, because the LY team that I was referee for had over 5,000 Qs. The only team that had over 5,000 Qs. Now this year there was more than that, of course, better conditions too. But what you find in Europe is you can be on 40 all day long and work stations all day long. And there's just an endless bucket of stations in Europe to work. The US openings were kind of in the late afternoon and early evening hours in Europe, especially towards the West Coast. Now, I heard a bunch of West Coast guys work my team, so I know they were getting out. But, you know, the signals aren't going to be huge when you're running 100 watts and an antenna that's at 20, 25 feet, and then even worse on wires that are at maybe 18 and 20 feet, something like that. But Steve, that gives you an idea of, you know, they just have to work what you can hear and follow the prop. But props like theirs a little bit different. They can work 80 longer in the morning and earlier in the evening than we could here because everything is so close.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
Okay, more questions from the folks here in the meeting? More questions from the Zoom folks?
Hey, Mike, is there any motivation or points for people chasing these guys, or from like us as a station chasing them?
Well, yeah, there are awards, and usually every WRTC has some sort of 1 month type event where you get in and you work stations and they get certificates for those type of things. And of course, otherwise, they might offer a participation certificate for so many QSOs, but there's no awards other than what you can win for any IARU contest here locally. The rules are a little bit different for those guys just because it's a major competition, but there's some differences from what we do in IARU, for example, and what they can do in IARU, but not a huge difference.
Okay, anybody else got questions anywhere? Looks like that's it. Mr. Mike, thank you. We appreciate it very much. As always, good presentation and good information. So thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.